Question 1. The performance metrics show a significant increase in the average time to complete critical business processes with an IBM FileNet Business Process Manager V5. 1. With no recent code deployments or infrastructure changes identified. Which of the following is the most appropriate initial step to diagnose the root cause of this performance degradation? Option A. Immediately initiate a comprehensive retraining program for all end users involved in the affected business processes, assuming user error is the primary driver of the slowdown. Option B. Roll back the most recent, albeit minor, configuration change made to the IBM FileNet BPM environment, even though it was not directly linked to the performance issue. Option C. Focus exclusively on optimizing the user interface components of the business processes, as user interaction is often perceived as a bottleneck. Option D. Analyze system logs and performance counters for the IBM FileNet BPM application servers, database servers, and any integrated middleware to identify specific error messages, resource contention, or unusual activity patterns. The correct answer is D. Analyze system logs and performance counters for the IBM FileNet BPM application servers, database servers, and any integrated middleware to identify specific error messages, resource contention, or unusual activity patterns. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in business process management where observed performance deviates from expected outcomes. The difficulty lies in accurately diagnosing the root cause of the performance degradation within a complex system like IBM FileNet Business Process Manager V5. 1. Which involves multiple interacting components, user behaviors, and system configurations. Without a systematic and evidence-based approach, it's easy to jump to conclusions, implement ineffective solutions, and potentially introduce new problems or violate operational guidelines. The pressure to quickly resolve performance issues adds to the challenge, potentially leading to hasty and ill-informed decisions. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a structured, data-driven investigation that prioritizes understanding the system's behavior before proposing solutions. This aligns with best practices in IT service management and operational excellence, which emphasize root cause analysis and evidence-based decision-making. By examining system logs, performance counters, and process instance data, one can identify specific bottlenecks or anomalies. Correlating these findings with recent changes or known system limitations provides a solid foundation for targeted remediation. This methodical approach ensures that solutions address the actual problem, minimizing the risk of unintended consequences and maximizing the efficiency of resolution efforts. It also supports compliance with any internal operational policies that mandate documented problem-solving procedures and performance monitoring. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately assuming a specific component, such as the workflow engine, is the sole cause of the performance degradation without sufficient evidence. This is a premature conclusion that ignores other potential factors like network latency, database performance, or user interface issues. Ethically, this approach can lead to wasted resources and time spent on fixing a non-existent or secondary problem, which is unprofessional. From a regulatory or compliance perspective, it could violate internal service level agreements, SLAs, if the issue is not resolved promptly due to misdiagnosis. Another incorrect approach is to focus solely on user training as the solution without investigating system-level issues. A user error can impact performance, attributing all degradation to users without analyzing system logs or process execution data is a failure of due diligence. This can lead to unnecessary and potentially costly training initiatives that do not address the underlying technical problems. It also fails to uphold professional responsibility to thoroughly investigate all facets of a performance issue. A third incorrect approach is to implement broad, system-wide configuration changes without a clear hypothesis or testing plan. This is a shotgun approach that is highly risky. It can destabilize the entire system, introduce new performance issues, or inadvertently violate security or operational configurations. This demonstrates a lack of professional judgment and a disregard for the potential negative impacts on the business operations that rely on the FileNet BPM system. It also bypasses standard change management procedures, which are often mandated by regulatory compliance frameworks to ensure system integrity and auditability. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic problem-solving methodology. This typically involves 1. Problem identification and definition. Clearly articulate the observed performance issue. 2. Data gathering. Collect relevant system logs, performance metrics, and process data. 3. Hypothesis generation. Formulate plausible explanations for the observed issues. 4. Hypothesis testing. Use the gathered data to validate or invalidate hypotheses. 5. Root cause analysis. Identify the fundamental reason for the performance degradation. 6. Solution design and implementation. Develop and deploy targeted solutions. 7. Verification and monitoring. Confirm the effectiveness of the solution and monitor for recurrence. This structured approach ensures that decisions are informed, efficient, and minimize risk, aligning with professional ethics and any applicable operational or regulatory guidelines. Question 2. Governance review demonstrates that the current IBM FileNet Business Process Manager v5, one implementation for managing customer onboarding processes, may not fully comply with the UK's Financial Conduct Authority, FCA, regulations regarding data retention and auditability of client interactions. Which of the following actions represents the most appropriate and compliant approach to address this finding? Option A. Rely on the default audit trail capabilities of IBM FileNet BPM and assume that standard system logs are sufficient for FCA compliance, without further investigation into specific regulatory requirements. Option B. Advise business stakeholders to manually maintain separate records of critical client interactions and process decisions outside of IBM FileNet BPM to ensure compliance, as the existing system is deemed insufficient. Option C. Increase the general system logging level in IBM FileNet BPM to capture all available information, assuming this will satisfy audit requirements, and implement a standard document archiving policy for all client-related files. Option D. Configure IBM FileNet BPM to capture and retain detailed audit logs of all user actions, process state changes, and data modifications within the customer onboarding process for the duration mandated by FCA regulations, and ensure appropriate document retention policies are applied to all associated client documents. The correct answer is D. Configure IBM FileNet BPM to capture and retain detailed audit logs of all user actions, process state changes, and data modifications within the customer onboarding process for the duration mandated by FCA regulations, and ensure appropriate document retention policies are applied to all associated client documents. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in enterprise content management and business process automation, ensuring that a critical business process, managed by IBM FileNet Business Process Manager, BPM, adheres to evolving regulatory requirements for data retention and auditability. The challenge lies in balancing the need for efficient process execution with the imperative to maintain compliance, especially when the existing BPM solution might not have been designed with the latest regulatory mandates in mind. The risk of non-compliance, leading to potential fines, reputational damage, and legal repercussions, necessitates a proactive and informed approach. The complexity arises from understanding the specific implications of the chosen regulatory framework on the technical implementation within FileNet BPM. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding of the specific regulatory framework applicable to the organization's industry and jurisdiction. This framework dictates the requirements for data retention periods, audit trails, and data security. For IBM FileNet BPM v5. 1. This translates to configuring the system to capture and store necessary audit information, implementing appropriate retention policies for process data and associated documents, and ensuring that access controls are robust enough to meet compliance standards. This approach prioritizes a systematic review of the regulatory requirements and their direct mapping to FileNet BPM's capabilities, ensuring that the solution is not only functional but also compliant. This aligns with best practices for regulated industries where adherence to specific legal and industry standards is paramount. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing a solution without a clear understanding of the specific regulatory framework is a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This could involve making assumptions about retention periods or audit requirements, which are likely to be inaccurate and lead to non-compliance. For instance, simply increasing the logging level in FileNet BPM without understanding the specific data points required by the regulation would be inefficient and potentially miss crucial audit information. Similarly, applying a generic document retention policy without considering the nuances of process-specific data and its regulatory implications would be insufficient. Another failure would be to ignore the audit trail capabilities of FileNet BPM, assuming that standard system logs are adequate, when regulations often require more granular and immutable audit records of process activities and data modifications. These approaches demonstrate a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the legal obligations of the organization. Professional reasoning. Professionals faced with this situation should adopt a structured decision-making process. First, identify and thoroughly understand the applicable regulatory framework. Second, assess the current state of the IBM FileNet BPM v5. One implementation against these requirements, identifying gaps. Third, consult with legal and compliance experts to interpret the regulatory nuances. Fourth, design and implement technical solutions within FileNet BPM that directly address the identified gaps, prioritizing configuration changes over custom development where possible for maintainability. Finally, establish ongoing monitoring and regular review processes to ensure continued compliance as regulations evolve. This systematic approach mitigates risk and ensures that the business process remains both efficient and compliant. Question 3. Process analysis reveals a critical business process in IBM FileNet Business Process Manager v5. One is experiencing a performance bottleneck. A senior developer proposes an immediate, undocumented modification to a core process definition in the production environment to alleviate the issue, citing the urgency of business operations. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Document the proposed change, including its rationale, potential risks, and expected benefits, and submit it through the formal change control process for review and approval before implementation. Option B. Directly modify the process definition in the production environment as proposed by the developer to address the immediate performance issue. Option C. Implement the change in a development or test environment but do not formally document the process or the rationale behind the change, assuming it will be straightforward. Option D. Proceed with the change based on verbal approval from a manager, without creating any formal record of the modification. The correct answer is A. Document the proposed change, including its rationale, potential risks, and expected benefits, and submit it through the formal change control process for review and approval before implementation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the ethical obligation to maintain data integrity and adhere to regulatory compliance within a business process management system. The core dilemma lies in balancing the immediate need for a quick fix to a perceived system issue with the long-term consequences of bypassing established change control procedures. The pressure to deliver a rapid solution, potentially driven by business urgency or stakeholder expectations, can create a conflict with the responsible and documented approach required for system modifications. Careful judgment is required to assess the true impact of the proposed change and to ensure that any deviation from standard practice is fully justified and mitigated. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves meticulously documenting the proposed change, including its rationale, potential risks, and expected benefits, and submitting it through the formal change control process. This aligns with best professional practices for system management and regulatory compliance. In the context of IBM FileNet Business Process Manager v5, 1. This would typically involve utilizing the system's versioning and deployment mechanisms, along with any organizational change management protocols. This ensures that all modifications are auditable, traceable, and have undergone appropriate review and approval, thereby safeguarding data integrity and system stability. This approach upholds the principles of accountability and transparency, which are fundamental to ethical IT practice and regulatory adherence. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to directly modify the process definition in the production environment without following the established change control procedures. This bypasses critical review and testing stages, increasing the risk of introducing unintended errors, system instability, or data corruption. From a regulatory perspective, this lack of auditable change management can lead to non-compliance with data governance and audit trail requirements, potentially resulting in significant penalties. Ethically, it demonstrates a disregard for established protocols designed to protect the integrity of the system and the data it manages. Another incorrect approach is to implement the change in a development or test environment but fail to properly document the process or the rationale behind the change. While testing is a crucial step, insufficient documentation renders the change unrepeatable and untraceable. This hinders future troubleshooting, auditing, and knowledge transfer. It also fails to provide the necessary evidence of due diligence if an issue arises later, potentially leading to regulatory scrutiny and a breakdown in accountability. A third incorrect approach is to rely on informal communication or verbal approval for the change without any formal record. This creates ambiguity and a lack of clear ownership and responsibility. In the event of a system failure or data discrepancy, it becomes impossible to determine who authorized the change or what the intended outcome was. This directly contravenes the principles of good governance and auditability, which are essential for maintaining trust and compliance. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that prioritizes adherence to established protocols and ethical considerations. This involves 1. Understanding the business requirement and the proposed technical solution. 2. Identifying the relevant change management and regulatory frameworks. 3. Evaluating the risks and benefits of the proposed change. 4. Following the formal change control process, which includes documentation, testing, and approval. 5. Ensuring that all actions are auditable and traceable. In situations of urgency, professionals should advocate for expedited but still compliant change processes, rather than resorting to shortcuts that compromise integrity. Question 4. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a key financial transaction processing workflow, managed by IBM FileNet Business Process Manager v5.1, is experiencing performance degradation. The business unit is eager to implement rapid changes to improve throughput. Which of the following approaches best balances the need for process optimization with regulatory compliance and risk mitigation? Option A. Implement changes based on informal feedback from the business unit to expedite transaction processing, assuming existing controls will remain effective. Option B. Prioritize cost reduction by streamlining steps that appear to add the most time, without a formal impact assessment on regulatory controls or audit trails. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive analysis of the current process. Identify specific bottlenecks using performance metrics, design targeted optimizations with built-in compliance checks, and validate these changes through rigorous testing involving compliance and audit teams before deployment. Option D. Focus on redesigning the workflow to achieve maximum speed, with a plan to address any compliance issues that may arise after the new process is live. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive analysis of the current process, identify specific bottlenecks using performance metrics, design targeted optimizations with built-in compliance checks, and validate these changes through rigorous testing involving compliance and audit teams before deployment. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in process optimization within a regulated environment like financial services, where IBM FileNet Business Process Manager, BPM, is often deployed. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for efficiency gains through process redesign with the imperative to maintain compliance with stringent regulatory requirements. Specifically, changes to a critical financial transaction workflow could inadvertently introduce new risks or fail to address existing ones, potentially leading to regulatory breaches, financial penalties, and reputational damage. The challenge is to identify and implement optimizations that demonstrably improve performance without compromising the integrity and compliance of the process. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic, data-driven, and compliance-centric methodology. It prioritizes understanding the current state, identifying bottlenecks through objective metrics, and then designing changes that are rigorously tested against regulatory requirements and business objectives. This approach ensures that any optimization is not only efficient, but also robust and compliant. By involving compliance and audit teams early, and by conducting thorough impact assessments and validation, the organization mitigates the risk of unintended consequences. This aligns with the principles of good governance and risk management, which are paramount in regulated industries. The focus on measurable outcomes and documented validation provides auditable evidence of due diligence and compliance, which is crucial for regulatory scrutiny. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing changes based solely on anecdotal feedback or perceived inefficiencies without a structured analysis and validation process is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach risks overlooking critical compliance controls or introducing new vulnerabilities that could lead to non-compliance. For instance, a change that speeds up a step but bypasses a mandatory data validation check would be a direct violation of data integrity regulations. Similarly, optimizing for speed without considering the audit trail or segregation of duties could violate financial crime prevention mandates. Relying on the assumption that existing controls will automatically apply to new process flows is also a failure, as process changes can alter the effectiveness of existing controls. Finally, prioritizing cost reduction over compliance or risk mitigation is a fundamental breach of professional responsibility in a regulated sector. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this domain must adopt a risk-based, evidence-driven decision-making framework. This involves 1. Understanding the regulatory landscape relevant to the specific business process. 2. Conducting a thorough current state analysis, including process mapping and performance metrics. 3. Identifying optimization opportunities through objective analysis, not just subjective opinions. 4. Prioritizing opportunities based on potential impact on efficiency, risk, and compliance. 5. Designing changes with compliance and auditability as core requirements. 6. Rigorously testing proposed changes in a controlled environment, simulating real-world conditions and regulatory checks. 7. Engaging relevant stakeholders including compliance, legal, and audit throughout the process. 8. Documenting all analysis, design decisions, testing results, and validation outcomes. 9. Implementing changes incrementally and monitoring their performance and compliance post-deployment. Question 5. Upon reviewing the implementation of a new IBM FileNet Business Process Manager V5, one solution designed to automate customer onboarding for a US-based financial institution, a critical security and compliance concern has arisen regarding the handling of sensitive customer data. The solution involves capturing and processing various forms of personally identifiable information, PI, and financial details. The project team is debating the most effective strategy for ensuring regulatory compliance, specifically concerning data protection and auditability under relevant U.S. federal financial regulations. Which of the following approaches best addresses the regulatory requirements for data security and auditability within this FileNet BPM v5? 1. Implementation. Option A. Rely on the default security settings provided by IBM FileNet Business Process Manager v5. 1. And assume that these are sufficient to meet U.S. federal financial regulatory requirements for data protection. Option B. Focus primarily on encrypting all data at rest and in transit, without explicitly classifying data sensitivity or implementing role-based access controls tailored to specific data types. Option C. Implement granular access controls within FileNet BPM based on a detailed data classification scheme, ensuring that only authorized personnel can access specific types of sensitive data, and establish comprehensive audit logging for all data access and modification events. Option D. Implement broad access permissions for all users within the FileNet BPM solution to facilitate efficient process flow, and conduct periodic ad hoc security reviews rather than continuous audit logging. Correct answer is C. Implement granular access controls within FileNet BPM based on a detailed data classification scheme, ensuring that only authorized personnel can access specific types of sensitive data, and establish comprehensive audit logging for all data access and modification events. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent complexity of managing business processes within a regulated environment, specifically concerning data privacy and security as mandated by U.S. federal regulations relevant to financial services, e.g., GLBA, SOX, and potentially HIPAA if health data is involved, though the exam focus is FileNet BPM. The core challenge lies in balancing the need for efficient process automation with the stringent requirements for data protection, auditability, and access control. A misstep can lead to significant regulatory penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a comprehensive, risk-based strategy that aligns with U.S. regulatory expectations for data handling and system integrity. By thoroughly documenting data classification, implementing granular access controls based on the principle of least privilege, and ensuring robust audit trails. The solution directly addresses regulatory mandates for data protection and accountability. This proactive stance minimizes the risk of non-compliance and demonstrates due diligence in safeguarding sensitive information within the FileNet BPM environment. An incorrect approach that fails to classify data before implementing security controls is professionally unacceptable. This oversight directly violates the spirit and letter of U.S. data privacy regulations, which require organizations to understand the sensitivity of the data they process and protect it accordingly. Without classification, access controls are likely to be either overly restrictive, hindering legitimate business operations, or insufficiently protective, exposing sensitive data to unauthorized access. This creates a significant compliance gap and increases the risk of data breaches and associated penalties. Another incorrect approach that relies solely on generic security measures without considering the specific context of FileNet BPM processes is also professionally flawed. U.S. regulations emphasize a tailored approach to security, recognizing that different types of data and processes have varying risk profiles. Generic measures may not adequately address the unique vulnerabilities or compliance requirements associated with specific business processes automated by FileNet BPM, such as the handling of personally identifiable information (PI) or financial transaction data. This lack of specificity can lead to inadequate protection and noncompliance. A third incorrect approach that neglects the importance of comprehensive audit logging for all data access and modification events within FileNet BPM is professionally unsound. U.S. regulations, particularly those related to financial reporting and data integrity, mandate detailed audit trails to ensure accountability and facilitate investigations. Without such logs, it becomes impossible to demonstrate compliance, investigate security incidents effectively, or identify unauthorized activities, thereby creating a critical vulnerability from a regulatory and security perspective. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment. This begins with understanding the regulatory landscape applicable to the data being processed. Next, a thorough inventory and classification of data within the FileNet BPM solution are essential. Subsequently, security controls, including access management and audit logging, should be designed and implemented based on the data classification and regulatory requirements, adhering to the principle of least privilege. Finally, regular reviews and updates of these controls are crucial to maintain compliance and adapt to evolving threats and regulations. Question 6. Comparative studies suggest that when a high-value customer complaint triggers a critical decision point within an IBM FileNet Business Process Manager V5, one workflow, and the standard resolution path is insufficient, what is the most professionally sound approach to ensure both timely resolution and adherence to governance principles? Option A. Empowering a senior team member with appropriate delegated authority to review the exception, make a documented decision, and potentially initiate an authorized deviation from the standard workflow. Option B. Allowing the junior team member who initially received the complaint to unilaterally decide on an ad hoc resolution, prioritizing speed over procedural adherence. Option C. Immediately escalating the complaint to the highest executive level without any initial assessment or proposed solution from the operational team. Option D. Strictly following the predefined workflow steps, even if it means delaying the resolution and potentially exacerbating the customer's dissatisfaction. The correct answer is A. Empowering a senior team member with appropriate delegated authority to review the exception, make a documented decision, and potentially initiate an authorized deviation from the standard workflow. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in business process management, where a critical decision point arises regarding the handling of a complex, high-value customer complaint. The challenge lies in balancing the need for swift resolution, customer satisfaction, and adherence to established procedural guidelines within IBM FileNet Business Process Manager, BPM, V5. 1. The pressure to expedite the process, coupled with the potential for significant financial or reputational impact, can lead to deviations from best practices. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the chosen approach not only resolves the immediate issue, but also upholds the integrity of the BPM system and regulatory compliance. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a structured, documented, and auditable decision-making process. By escalating the issue to a designated supervisor with the authority to override standard procedures, the organization ensures that the decision is made by someone with a comprehensive understanding of the business context, potential risks, and the authority to accept those risks. This aligns with principles of good governance and internal control, ensuring that deviations are justified and recorded, which is crucial for compliance and future process improvement. In the context of IBM FileNet BPM v5, 1. This would typically involve leveraging workflow capabilities to route the exception to the appropriate personnel for review and authorization, maintaining a clear audit trail. An incorrect approach that bypasses established escalation paths and allows a junior team member to unilaterally make a significant decision, even with good intentions, represents a regulatory and ethical failure. This failure stems from a lack of proper authorization and oversight, potentially leading to inconsistent application of policies and an inability to trace the rationale behind critical decisions. Such an approach undermines the control framework of the BPM system, making it difficult to audit or investigate if issues arise later. It also exposes the organization to increased risk, as the junior team member may not have the full understanding of the implications of their decision. Another incorrect approach, that of rigidly adhering to the standard process without considering the exceptional nature of the complaint, is also professionally unacceptable. While procedural adherence is important, an inflexible approach in the face of a critical, high-impact situation can lead to customer dissatisfaction and potential business loss. This demonstrates a failure to exercise professional judgment and adapt to dynamic circumstances, which is a core competency in business process management. It suggests a lack of understanding of when and how to apply exceptions within a controlled framework. The professional reasoning framework that should be applied in similar situations involves a multi-step process. 1. Assess the situation. Understand the urgency, impact, and complexity of the issue. 2. Consult established procedures. Determine if the situation falls within standard operating guidelines. 3. Identify potential deviations. If the situation is exceptional, identify the specific procedural elements that need to be addressed. 4. Evaluate risks and benefits. Weigh the consequences of adhering to the standard process versus making an exception. 5. Seek appropriate authorization. If an exception is warranted, escalate the decision to the designated authority with the power to approve it. 6. Document the decision. Ensure that the rationale for the decision and any approved deviations are thoroughly documented for audit and future reference. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are informed, authorized, and defensible. Question 7. Compliance review shows that a financial institution is implementing IBM FileNet Business Process Manager v5. 1. To automate loan origination processes. The implementation team has focused primarily on streamlining workflow efficiency and reducing processing times. However, there has been minimal consideration given to how sensitive customer financial data, protected under U.S. federal regulations like the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, GLBA, will be secured and managed within the BPM system's lifecycle. Which of the following approaches best addresses the regulatory compliance gap identified? Option A. Integrate GLBA compliance requirements into the BPM design and configuration from the outset, including data access controls, encryption, and audit logging, and validate these controls before go live. Option B. Assume that the default security settings of IBM FileNet BPM v5 1 are sufficient to meet GLBA requirements for financial data processing. Option C. Conduct a post-implementation audit to identify any GLBA violations and then implement necessary remediation measures. Option D. Prioritize the implementation of BPM's core workflow functionalities and address GLBA compliance requirements in a subsequent project phase. The correct answer is C. Conduct a post-implementation audit to identify any GLBA violations and then implement necessary remediation measures. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in regulated industries where the implementation of new technology, like IBM FileNet Business Process Manager, BPM v5, 1, must align with existing compliance mandates. The challenge lies in balancing the functional benefits of BPM with the stringent requirements of data privacy and security regulations. Specifically, ensuring that sensitive customer data processed within BPM workflows is handled in accordance with the relevant U.S. federal regulations is paramount. Failure to do so can lead to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. The complexity arises from understanding how BPM's features interact with these regulations and ensuring that the configuration and usage patterns are compliant by design. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a proactive and integrated strategy for compliance. This means that during the design and implementation phases of IBM FileNet BPM v5, 1. A thorough assessment of data handling requirements under relevant U.S. federal regulations, such as HIPAA for healthcare data or GLBA for financial data, depending on the specific industry context of the BPM implementation, must be conducted. This assessment should inform the configuration of BPM, including access controls, data encryption, audit logging, and data retention policies. The goal is to embed compliance directly into the BPM solution, rather than attempting to retrofit it later. This approach ensures that the system is built with privacy and security as core tenets, minimizing the risk of non-compliance and demonstrating due diligence to regulatory bodies. It aligns with the principle of privacy by design and security by design, which are increasingly expected by regulators. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to assume that the out-of-the-box features of IBM FileNet BPM v5 1 are inherently compliant with all U.S. federal regulations without specific configuration or validation. This overlooks the fact that compliance is context-dependent and requires tailoring the system to specific data types and regulatory requirements. The regulatory or ethical failure here is negligence and a lack of due diligence, potentially leading to breaches of data privacy laws. Another incorrect approach is to defer all compliance considerations to the post-implementation audit phase. While audits are necessary, relying solely on them to identify and rectify compliance issues is reactive and risky. It implies a lack of proactive risk management and can result in significant remediation efforts and penalties if major noncompliance is discovered late. The failure is in prioritizing expediency over robust compliance planning, which is ethically questionable and legally precarious. A third incorrect approach is to implement BPM with a focus solely on business process efficiency, disregarding the need for specific data handling controls mandated by U.S. federal regulations. This demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of the responsibilities associated with processing sensitive data. The regulatory failure is the direct violation of data protection statutes, and the ethical failure is prioritizing operational goals over the safeguarding of customer information. Professional reasoning. Professionals tasked with implementing IBM FileNet BPM v5 1 in a regulated U.S. environment must adopt a risk-based, proactive compliance strategy. This involves 1. Identifying all applicable U.S. federal regulations based on the type of data being processed. 2. Conducting a comprehensive data flow analysis within the proposed BPM solution. 3. Designing and configuring BPM features, e.g., access controls, audit trails, encryption, to meet specific regulatory requirements. 4. Documenting all compliance-related design decisions and configurations. 5. Implementing robust testing procedures to validate compliance controls. 6. Establishing ongoing monitoring and review processes to ensure continued adherence to regulations. This systematic approach ensures that compliance is an integral part of the solution, minimizing risk and demonstrating a commitment to regulatory obligations. Question 8. To address the challenge of identifying inefficiencies in a customer onboarding process managed by IBM FileNet Business Process Manager v5. 1. A business analyst suspects that certain customer personally identifiable information, PI, within case data might be contributing to delays. The analyst is considering several methods to investigate this hypothesis. Which approach best upholds regulatory compliance and ethical data handling standards? Option A. Share a sample of raw, unanonymized customer case data with an external process improvement consultant to help them identify potential PII-related issues within the workflow. Option B. Develop custom scripts to extract and analyze raw customer data from FileNet, focusing on identifying patterns in PII fields that correlate with longer processing times, without seeking formal approval for the data extraction method. Option C. Directly query the FileNet database using SQL to extract all fields related to customer PII for analysis, assuming the intention is to improve the process. Option D. Utilize the built-in reporting and auditing features of IBM FileNet Business Process Manager V5. 1. To analyze process metrics and identify bottlenecks, and if further granular data is required, submit a formal request for anonymized or aggregated data analysis through the established data governance channels. The correct answer is C. Directly query the FileNet database using SQL to extract all fields related to customer PII for analysis, assuming the intention is to improve the process. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents an ethical dilemma concerning data privacy and the responsible use of business process management tools. The challenge lies in balancing the need for process improvement and data analysis with the legal and ethical obligations to protect sensitive customer information. The temptation to access and analyze data that might be outside the scope of authorized use, even with good intentions, can lead to significant compliance breaches and erosion of trust. The core difficulty is distinguishing between legitimate process monitoring and unauthorized data exploration, especially when the lines can become blurred in complex systems like IBM FileNet Business Process Manager. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes adherence to established data governance policies and legal frameworks governing data privacy. In the context of IBM FileNet Business Process Manager V5, 1. This means strictly adhering to the access controls and audit trails configured within the system. Any analysis requiring access to sensitive customer data must be explicitly authorized, documented, and performed through approved channels that maintain data integrity and confidentiality. This aligns with principles of data minimization and purpose limitation, ensuring that data is only accessed and used for the specific, legitimate purposes for which it was collected and processed. This approach upholds regulatory compliance and ethical data handling standards. Incorrect approach is analysis. Accessing customer data directly from the FileNet database without explicit authorization, even for the purpose of identifying process bottlenecks, represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This bypasses established security protocols and audit mechanisms, violating data privacy regulations that mandate controlled access to sensitive information. It also undermines the principle of least privilege, granting access beyond what is necessary for the individual's role. Using undocumented scripts or custom tools to extract and analyze data from FileNet, even if the intention is to improve process efficiency, is also professionally unacceptable. This practice introduces risks of data corruption, unauthorized disclosure, and noncompliance with audit requirements. It creates a shadow IT environment where data handling is not transparent or governed by organizational policies, potentially leading to breaches of data protection laws. Sharing raw, unanonymized customer data with external consultants or team members without proper data anonymization, consent, or a clear legal basis is a severe ethical and regulatory violation. This exposes sensitive information to unnecessary risk and breaches confidentiality agreements and data protection legislation, demonstrates a disregard for the potential harm that unauthorized disclosure of personal data can cause to individuals. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the scope of their authorized access and the data governance policies in place. When faced with a need to analyze data, the first step is to determine if the required data is accessible through authorized reporting tools or standard system functionalities. If not, the next step is to formally request access or data extraction through the appropriate channels, clearly articulating the business justification and ensuring that all necessary approvals and compliance checks, e.g., data privacy impact assessments, are completed. This structured approach ensures that all actions are compliant, ethical, and auditable, protecting both the organization and the individuals whose data is being processed. Question 9. The evaluation methodology shows that a financial services organization is implementing IBM FileNet Business Process Manager V5. 1. To automate loan origination processes. This process involves handling sensitive customer financial data, including credit scores, income verification, and personal identification details. The organization operates under U.S. federal regulations such as the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, GLBA, and various state-specific data privacy laws. Which of the following approaches best ensures regulatory compliance throughout the BPM implementation lifecycle? Option A. conducting a comprehensive regulatory impact assessment early in the project to identify all applicable data privacy and security mandates, and then designing and configuring the BPM workflows and system settings to explicitly meet these identified requirements, including audit trails and data minimization. Option B, relying on the default security configurations provided by IBM FileNet Business Process Manager v5. One, and assuming they are sufficient for handling sensitive financial data under U.S. regulations. Option C, implementing robust technical security controls within FileNet BPM, such as encryption and access restrictions, and assuming these inherently satisfy GLBA and state privacy law requirements. Option D, focusing primarily on the functional requirements of the loan origination process to maximize efficiency, with a plan to address regulatory compliance concerns only if audit findings arise post-implementation. The correct answer is C, implementing robust technical security controls within FileNet BPM, such as encryption and access restrictions, and assuming these inherently satisfy GLBA and state privacy law requirements. Explanation: the evaluation methodology shows a critical need for robust regulatory compliance in the implementation of IBM FileNet Business Process Manager, BPM, v5. 1. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the efficiency gains of BPM with the stringent requirements of data privacy and security regulations, specifically those applicable within the United States, such as HIPAA, Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. If health-related data is involved, or SOX, Sarbanes-Oxley Act, for financial data, and general data protection principles under various state laws. Misinterpreting or neglecting these regulations can lead to severe financial penalties, reputational damage, and legal repercussions. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a proactive and comprehensive risk assessment and mitigation strategy. This involves understanding the specific data types processed by the BPM solution, identifying relevant regulatory mandates, and embedding compliance controls directly into the process design and system configuration. This aligns with the principle of privacy by design and security by design, ensuring that compliance is not an afterthought but an integral part of the solution. It demonstrates due diligence and a commitment to protecting sensitive information, which is a fundamental ethical and legal obligation. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on technical implementation without considering regulatory implications fails to meet legal obligations. For instance, implementing a process that captures personally identifiable information, PI, without adequate access controls, audit trails, or data minimization measures directly violates data protection principles and specific regulations like HIPAA or state-level privacy laws. This creates a significant compliance risk. Another incorrect approach might be to assume that standard security measures are sufficient without a specific regulatory review. This overlooks the unique requirements and penalties associated with non-compliance in regulated industries. A third incorrect approach could be to delay compliance considerations until after deployment, which is a reactive and often more costly strategy, and can lead to the need for extensive and disruptive remediation, increasing the likelihood of ongoing non-compliance. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a structured approach. First, identify all applicable regulations based on the industry and data types involved. Second, conduct a thorough risk assessment to understand how the BPM solution might impact compliance. Third, design and configure the BPM solution with compliance controls embedded from the outset. Fourth, implement robust monitoring and auditing mechanisms to ensure ongoing adherence. Finally, establish clear policies and provide training to users to reinforce compliance best practices. Question 10. System analysis indicates that a new regulatory mandate has been issued concerning the retention and auditable tracking of sensitive customer data processed through automated workflows. Given the organization's reliance on IBM FileNet Business Process Manager v5. 1. For managing these workflows, what is the most appropriate course of action to ensure ongoing compliance? Option A. Proceed with implementing changes to FileNet BPM workflows based on initial interpretations of the regulation, prioritizing speed of deployment over formal validation. Option B. Conduct a thorough impact assessment of all FileNet BPM workflows that handle sensitive customer data. Identify necessary modifications to data handling, retention policies, and audit logging within the BPM solution, and implement these changes through a controlled, validated process. Option C. Wait for an official audit or inquiry from the regulatory body before initiating any review or modification of the FileNet BPM workflows. Option D. Assume that the existing FileNet BPM configurations are sufficient for the new regulatory requirements and monitor for any immediate operational issues. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough impact assessment of all FileNet BPM workflows that handle sensitive customer data. Identify necessary modifications to data handling, retention policies, and audit logging within the BPM solution, and implement these changes through a controlled, validated process. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in regulated industries where business process automation must strictly adhere to evolving compliance mandates. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for efficient, automated processes with the imperative to maintain auditable trails and data integrity as dictated by regulatory bodies. The introduction of a new regulatory requirement, particularly one impacting data handling and retention, necessitates a thorough review and potential modification of existing FileNet Business Process Manager (BPM) solutions. Failure to adapt can lead to significant penalties, reputational damage, and operational disruption. The challenge is amplified by the need to implement changes without negatively impacting ongoing business operations or introducing new compliance risks. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic, documented process of assessing the impact of the new regulation on existing FileNet BPM workflows. This includes identifying all processes that handle or store data subject to the new requirements, analyzing how that data is managed within the BPM solution, e.g., document storage, metadata, audit logs, and determining the necessary modifications. This might involve updating workflow steps, data retention policies, security configurations, or audit logging mechanisms within FileNet BPM. Crucially, any changes must be thoroughly tested and validated against the new regulatory requirements, and then deployed through a controlled change management process. This approach ensures that compliance is achieved comprehensively, with clear documentation supporting the changes and demonstrating due diligence to regulatory auditors. It aligns with the principles of proactive compliance and risk management inherent in regulatory frameworks governing data handling and process automation. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to assume that existing FileNet BPM configurations are automatically compliant with new regulations without explicit verification. This is a failure of due diligence and proactive risk management. Regulatory requirements are specific and often change, and relying on outdated assumptions can lead to non-compliance, resulting in fines and legal repercussions. Another incorrect approach is to implement changes to FileNet BPM workflows based on informal discussions or interpretations of the regulation, without a formal impact assessment or documented validation. This introduces a high risk of misinterpretation and incomplete implementation, potentially creating new compliance gaps or failing to address the core requirements. It bypasses essential change management and validation protocols, undermining the integrity and auditability of the system. A third incorrect approach is to delay addressing the regulatory changes until an audit or enforcement action occurs. This reactive stance is highly unprofessional and exposes the organization to significant penalties and reputational damage. It demonstrates a lack of commitment to ongoing compliance and a failure to prioritize regulatory obligations. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a situation should adopt a structured, risk-based approach. First, thoroughly understand the new regulatory requirements and their specific implications for business processes and data management. Second, conduct a comprehensive impact assessment of all relevant FileNet BPM solutions, identifying all touchpoints with the regulated data. Third, design and implement necessary changes following a formal change management process, including rigorous testing and validation against the regulatory mandates. Fourth, maintain detailed documentation of all assessments, changes, and validation activities to demonstrate compliance. This systematic process ensures that changes are effective, auditable, and minimize the risk of non-compliance. Question 11. Strategic planning requires a robust approach to regulatory compliance when designing and deploying business processes using IBM FileNet Business Process Manager v5. 1. Considering the need for both agility and adherence to relevant regulations, which of the following strategies best ensures that business processes are compliant from inception through ongoing operation? Option A. Integrate compliance requirements and validation checkpoints directly into the business process design and development lifecycle, supported by regular audits and continuous monitoring. Option B. Prioritize rapid deployment of business processes and address compliance concerns through ad hoc reviews and remediation efforts after the processes are live. Option C. Rely solely on external auditors to identify and report compliance issues during periodic reviews, without proactive internal integration of compliance measures. Option D. Delegate all compliance responsibilities to the IT department, assuming they can independently ensure adherence to all regulatory mandates. Correct answer is A. Integrate compliance requirements and validation checkpoints directly into the business process design and development lifecycle, supported by regular audits and continuous monitoring. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between accelerating business process deployment and ensuring adherence to stringent regulatory compliance requirements within the IBM FileNet Business Process Manager v5. 1. Environment. The pressure to deliver functionality quickly can lead to shortcuts that compromise data integrity, auditability, and security, all critical components of regulatory adherence. Careful judgment is required to balance these competing demands. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a proactive and integrated strategy for regulatory compliance. By embedding compliance considerations into the design and development lifecycle, organizations can mitigate risks early, reduce the cost of remediation, and ensure that business processes are not only efficient but also legally sound and auditable. This aligns with the principles of compliance by design and demonstrates a commitment to responsible data handling and process governance, which are fundamental to regulatory frameworks governing data privacy, financial reporting, and operational integrity. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on rapid deployment without adequate compliance checks introduces significant regulatory and ethical failures. This could lead to violations of data privacy laws, e.g., if personal data is mishandled or not adequately protected, financial reporting regulations, e.g., if process controls are insufficient to prevent fraud or misstatement, or industry-specific compliance mandates. Such failures can result in severe penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. Another incorrect approach that relies on post-deployment audits to identify compliance gaps is also professionally unacceptable. While audits are necessary, relying on them as the primary mechanism for compliance is reactive and inefficient. It means that non-compliant processes are already in production, potentially causing harm or incurring penalties before detection. This approach fails to demonstrate due diligence and a commitment to ongoing regulatory adherence. A third incorrect approach that delegates compliance responsibility entirely to the IT department, without business unit involvement, overlooks the fact that business processes are owned and operated by the business. Compliance is a shared responsibility. Without active participation from business stakeholders, IT may lack the context to implement appropriate controls, and business units may not fully understand or adhere to the compliance requirements embedded within the processes. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a risk-based approach. First, identify all applicable regulatory requirements relevant to the business processes being implemented. Second, assess the potential impact of noncompliance. Third, integrate compliance controls and validation steps directly into the FileNet BPM development and deployment lifecycle, rather than treating it as an afterthought. Fourth, ensure clear roles and responsibilities for compliance are defined and communicated across business and IT teams. Finally, establish a continuous monitoring and auditing framework to ensure ongoing adherence. Question 12. Consider a scenario where a business process, implemented in IBM FileNet Business Process Manager v5, 1. Encounters a data validation error during a critical step. The validation rule is designed to ensure that a specific customer identifier field contains only alphanumeric characters. The process instance receives data where this field contains a special character, causing the validation to fail. What is the most appropriate approach to handle this exception to maintain process integrity and compliance? Option A. Automatically discard the invalid data and proceed with the process using a placeholder value for the customer identifier. Option B. Automatically retry the validation step multiple times without any intervention, assuming the error might be transient. Option C. Route the process instance to a designated exception handling queue for a specialized team to investigate the data error, correct the invalid data, and reinitiate the validation step. Option D. Manually override the validation rule for this specific instance, allowing the process to continue with the invalid data. The correct answer is C. Route the process instance to a designated exception handling queue for a specialized team to investigate the data error, correct the invalid data, and reinitiate the validation step. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge in managing business process exceptions with an IBM FileNet Business Process Manager, BPM, v5. 1. Specifically concerning the handling of data validation failures. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for immediate process resolution with the imperative to maintain data integrity and adhere to established business rules, which are often implicitly or explicitly governed by regulatory frameworks related to data accuracy and auditability. Careful judgment is required to select an exception handling strategy that is both operationally efficient and compliant. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes data integrity and auditability, which are fundamental to regulatory compliance in many industries. By routing the exception to a dedicated team with the authority and expertise to correct the data and reevaluate the business rules, the organization ensures that the process continues with accurate information. This aligns with general principles of good governance and data management, which are often reinforced by specific regulations requiring accurate record-keeping and auditable trails. The systematic logging of the exception and its resolution provides the necessary audit trail for compliance purposes. An incorrect approach that immediately discards the invalid data without correction or proper logging fails to maintain data integrity. This can lead to inaccurate reporting, flawed decision-making, and potential regulatory violations if the data is subject to specific reporting requirements. Ethically, it represents a disregard for the accuracy of business records. Another incorrect approach, which automatically retries the process without addressing the root cause of the data validation failure, risks perpetuating errors and consuming unnecessary system resources. This can lead to a cascade of downstream issues and an inability to identify and rectify systemic data quality problems, which is a failure in professional diligence and can have significant compliance implications if the process is critical for regulatory reporting. A third incorrect approach, which involves manually overriding the validation rule without documenting the reason or impact, bypasses established controls and introduces an unacceptable level of risk. This undermines the integrity of the business process and creates an opaque audit trail, making it difficult to ascertain the validity of the process outcome and potentially violating regulations that mandate transparency and accountability in business operations. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve 1. Understanding the business process and its criticality. 2. Identifying the specific exception and its potential impact on data integrity and business outcomes. 3. Consulting relevant business rules and any applicable regulatory requirements. 4. Evaluating potential exception handling strategies based on their impact on data accuracy, auditability, and operational efficiency. 5. Selecting the strategy that best preserves data integrity and compliance while enabling timely resolution. Question 13. The investigation demonstrates that the implementation of IBM FileNet Business Process Manager v5 1 is imminent. To ensure a smooth transition and maximize the benefits of this new system, what is the most critical step in preparing the organization for this change? Option A. Assume that existing business processes will remain unchanged and that users will adapt to the new system without formal training. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive analysis of how the new FileNet BPM system will alter existing business processes, data flows, user roles, and required training. Option C. Focus exclusively on the technical aspects of deploying FileNet BPM, such as server installation and database setup. Option D. Rely on the vendor's default configuration settings for FileNet BPM to minimize initial setup complexity. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive analysis of how the new FileNet BPM system will alter existing business processes, data flows, user roles, and required training. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT project management where a new system, IBM FileNet Business Process Manager v5.1, is being implemented. The core challenge lies in accurately assessing the potential impact of this new system on existing business processes, data, and user workflows. Without a thorough impact assessment, there's a significant risk of disruption, inefficient adoption, and failure to realize the intended benefits of the new BPM solution. This requires a nuanced understanding of both the technical capabilities of FileNet BPM and the operational realities of the business. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic and comprehensive review of how the implementation of IBM FileNet Business Process Manager v5.1 will alter current business operations. This includes identifying all affected business processes, understanding the data flows and dependencies, evaluating the necessary changes to user roles and responsibilities, and assessing the training requirements. This approach aligns with best practices in change management and IT governance, ensuring that potential risks are identified and mitigated proactively. From a regulatory perspective, while specific regulations for this exam are not provided, a robust impact assessment is a fundamental component of due diligence and risk management, often implicitly or explicitly required by general IT governance frameworks and internal compliance policies to ensure business continuity and data integrity. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to focus solely on the technical configuration of FileNet BPM without considering its integration into existing business workflows. This overlooks the human element and operational impact, leading to potential user resistance and process inefficiencies. Ethically, this could be seen as a failure to adequately prepare stakeholders for change. Another incorrect approach would be to assume that the new system will seamlessly replace existing processes without any need for modification or user retraining. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and can result in significant operational disruptions and a failure to meet business objectives. This approach risks non-compliance with internal policies that mandate effective change management. A third incorrect approach would be to conduct a superficial assessment based on anecdotal evidence or the opinions of a few key individuals, rather than a structured, data-driven analysis. This can lead to missed impacts and an incomplete understanding of the true scope of change, potentially exposing the organization to unforeseen risks and compliance issues. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach impact assessment by first defining the scope of the assessment, then identifying all stakeholders, gathering information through interviews and documentation review, analyzing the findings to identify potential impacts, positive and negative, and finally documenting and communicating the results. This structured process ensures that all critical aspects are considered, risks are managed, and the implementation is aligned with business goals. Question 14. Upon reviewing the integration design for a critical FileNet BPM v5, one process that interacts with an external legacy system known for intermittent network connectivity issues, which of the following approaches best mitigates the risk of process failures and ensures business continuity? Option A. Implement a sophisticated retry mechanism with exponential backoff and a defined escalation path for persistent failures. Option B. Configure the integration to immediately terminate the BPM process upon encountering any error from the legacy system. Option C. Design the integration with a fixed, short retry interval for all encountered errors, without any escalation. Option D. Implement an indefinite retry loop for all integration errors, relying on system self-correction. The correct answer is A. Implement a sophisticated retry mechanism with exponential backoff and a defined escalation path for persistent failures. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge in IBM FileNet Business Process Manager, BPM v5. One where a critical business process requires integration with an external legacy system that has a known, albeit infrequent, tendency to experience intermittent network connectivity issues. The challenge lies in balancing the need for real-time process execution with the inherent unreliability of the external dependency. A failure in this integration can lead to process stalls, data inconsistencies, and significant business disruption, impacting customer satisfaction and operational efficiency. The pressure to deliver a functional solution quickly, coupled with the technical limitations of the legacy system, necessitates a robust and carefully considered approach to error handling and resilience. Correct approach analysis. Implementing a robust error handling and retry mechanism within the FileNet BPM solution is the best professional practice. This involves designing the integration points to gracefully handle exceptions originating from the legacy system. Specifically, this would entail configuring the integration component, e.g., a web service call, a message queue interaction, to detect specific error codes or timeouts indicative of network issues. Upon detecting such an error, the BPM process should not immediately fail. Instead, it should enter a retry loop with a defined exponential backoff strategy. This strategy gradually increases the delay between retries, preventing excessive load on the potentially struggling legacy system while providing sufficient opportunity for the network issue to resolve. Furthermore, the process should include a mechanism for escalating persistent failures to a human operator or an automated alert system after a configurable number of retries, ensuring that critical issues are not overlooked. This approach aligns with general IT best practices for system resilience and fault tolerance, minimizing business impact from transient external system failures. While specific regulations for FileNet BPM v5.1 implementation are not provided, the principle of ensuring business continuity and data integrity through robust error handling is a fundamental aspect of professional IT service delivery. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to simply allow the BPM process to fail immediately upon encountering any error from the legacy system. This is professionally unacceptable, as it demonstrates a lack of foresight regarding potential external system unreliability. It directly leads to process interruptions, potential data corruption if partial transactions occur, and a poor user experience. Ethically, it fails to uphold the responsibility of delivering a reliable and robust solution. Another incorrect approach would be to implement a fixed, short retry interval without any backoff strategy. While this attempts to address the issue, it can overwhelm the legacy system during periods of instability, potentially exacerbating the problem and leading to more frequent and prolonged outages. This approach lacks the sophistication required for professional system design and can be counterproductive. A third incorrect approach would be to implement an indefinite retry loop without any escalation mechanism. This is problematic because it can lead to processes consuming system resources indefinitely without resolution, potentially impacting overall system performance. It also fails to alert relevant personnel to persistent issues, leaving critical business functions in a stalled state without human intervention. This demonstrates a failure in proactive problem management. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach this scenario by first thoroughly understanding the failure modes of the external legacy system. This involves gathering information on common error types, frequency, and duration of issues. The next step is to design the integration with a focus on resilience, incorporating error detection, logging, and appropriate retry strategies. This should be followed by rigorous testing under simulated failure conditions to validate the effectiveness of the error handling mechanisms. Finally, establishing clear escalation paths and monitoring procedures ensures that any remaining failures are addressed promptly. This systematic approach prioritizes business continuity and minimizes risk. Question 15. The monitoring system demonstrates a recurring pattern of minor delays in the invoice approval step of a critical financial process, but the delays are not consistently impacting the overall process completion time. Option A. Immediately escalate the issue to the process owner and request a full rollback of the recent process configuration changes, as these may be the cause of the delays. Option B. Implement a temporary workaround by manually bypassing the invoice approval step for a subset of invoices to maintain throughput while further investigation occurs. Option C. Initiate a detailed root cause analysis of the invoice approval step, gathering historical performance data and system logs to identify the specific factors contributing to the delays before considering any remediation. Option D. Log the anomaly as a low-priority event and schedule a review for the next quarterly process audit, assuming the impact is negligible. The correct answer is C. Initiate a detailed root cause analysis of the invoice approval step, gathering historical performance data and system logs to identify the specific factors contributing to the delays before considering any remediation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the monitoring system has identified a potential deviation from expected process behavior, but the root cause is not immediately obvious. The challenge lies in determining the most appropriate course of action without causing undue disruption or overlooking a critical issue. The need for careful judgment arises from balancing the urgency of addressing potential problems with the risk of overreacting to false positives or minor anomalies. In a regulated environment, such as one governed by U.S. financial regulations, assuming this jurisdiction for the exam context, as FileNet is often used in such sectors. Timely and accurate identification and remediation of process failures are paramount to ensure compliance and prevent financial loss or reputational damage. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic investigation to understand the nature and impact of the detected anomaly. This aligns with best professional practices for process management and regulatory compliance. By first gathering more data and performing a root cause analysis, professionals can make an informed decision about the severity of the issue. This methodical approach minimizes the risk of implementing incorrect or unnecessary fixes, which could lead to further process degradation or compliance violations. In a U.S. regulatory context, this diligence is crucial for demonstrating adherence to internal controls and external audit requirements. It reflects a commitment to maintaining process integrity and proactively managing risks, which is a cornerstone of good corporate governance and regulatory adherence. Incorrect approaches analysis. Immediately escalating the issue for a full process rollback without understanding the cause is professionally unacceptable. This approach risks disrupting a functioning process based on incomplete information, potentially causing more harm than good. It demonstrates a lack of analytical rigor and could lead to unnecessary downtime, impacting business operations and potentially violating service-level agreements. From a regulatory standpoint, such an impulsive action might be seen as a failure to exercise due diligence in process management. Implementing a temporary workaround without investigating the root cause is also professionally unsound. While it might address the immediate symptom, it leaves the underlying problem unaddressed, increasing the likelihood of recurrence. This reactive approach can lead to a cascade of minor issues that, over time, significantly degrade process efficiency and compliance. In a U.S. regulatory framework, this could be interpreted as a failure to implement effective internal controls and a lack of commitment to continuous process improvement. Ignoring the anomaly because it appears minor is a critical ethical and professional failure. Even small deviations can be indicators of larger systemic issues or potential security vulnerabilities. In a regulated environment, all anomalies should be investigated to ensure compliance and prevent potential breaches. This approach demonstrates negligence and a disregard for the principles of robust process management and risk mitigation, which are fundamental to regulatory compliance in the U.S. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework when faced with system anomalies. This framework typically involves 1. Detection and alerting. The system flags an anomaly. 2. Initial assessment. A quick review to understand the nature of the alert. 3. Data gathering and analysis, collecting relevant logs, metrics, and context to understand the anomaly. 4. Root cause analysis, identifying the underlying reason for the deviation. 5. Impact assessment, determining the severity and scope of the problem. 6. Solution development, designing an appropriate remediation strategy. 7. Implementation and verification, applying the solution and confirming its effectiveness. 8. Documentation and review, recording the incident, resolution, and lessons learned. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are data-driven, proportionate, and aligned with professional and regulatory expectations. Question 16. Examination of the data shows that a critical business process instance in IBM FileNet Business Process Manager V5.1 has encountered a data validation failure during a human task. The process is designed to collect customer order details, and the validation rule has identified an invalid product code. The system needs to address this exception to ensure the order can be processed correctly. Which of the following approaches best addresses this scenario while maintaining auditability and compliance? Option A. Create a new, separate process instance to re-enter the order details from scratch, effectively abandoning the current instance with the invalid data. Option B. Automatically terminate the process instance and discard all associated data upon encountering the data validation failure to prevent further processing with invalid information. Option C. Implement a dedicated exception handling subprocess that is invoked when the data validation fails. This subprocess would guide the user through correcting the invalid product code or initiating a review process, with all actions logged. Option D. Directly modify the invalid product code within the active process instance's data fields through an administrative override without a specific logging mechanism for this override. The correct answer is C. Implement a dedicated exception handling subprocess that is invoked when the data validation fails. This subprocess would guide the user through correcting the invalid product code or initiating a review process, with all actions logged. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge in managing business process exceptions within IBM FileNet Business Process Manager, BPM v5. 1. Specifically concerning the handling of data validation failures. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for robust data integrity with the operational requirement to keep processes moving forward, even when encountering imperfect data. Professionals must make judicious decisions about how to address these exceptions without compromising regulatory compliance or business objectives. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a structured, auditable, and compliant method for exception handling. By implementing a dedicated exception handling subprocess, the system ensures that all deviations from the expected data flow are systematically captured, investigated, and resolved. This approach aligns with general principles of good governance and auditability, which are implicitly expected in regulated environments, even if specific FileNet v5.1 regulations are not explicitly detailed in the prompt. It allows for clear tracking of who resolved the exception, when, and how, providing a vital audit trail. This systematic approach minimizes the risk of data corruption or noncompliance by ensuring that exceptions are not simply ignored, but are actively managed. An incorrect approach that involves directly modifying the data within the active process instance without a defined exception subprocess is professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a lack of auditability and control. Without a clear record of the modification, it becomes impossible to trace the origin of the data error or the subsequent correction. This can lead to significant regulatory and ethical failures, particularly in industries with strict data integrity requirements. For instance, if the process involves financial transactions or patient health records, such ad hoc modifications could lead to inaccurate reporting, financial discrepancies, or patient safety issues, all of which carry severe legal and reputational consequences. Another incorrect approach, such as automatically discarding the process instance upon data validation failure, is also problematic. While it removes the problematic data, it does so at the cost of losing valuable business context and potentially failing to complete critical business functions. This can lead to operational inefficiencies and missed business opportunities, and in regulated environments, it could be seen as an attempt to circumvent proper data handling procedures. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a thorough understanding of the business process's criticality, the nature of the data being validated, and the potential impact of data errors. Professionals should always consider the auditability and traceability of their actions. When exceptions occur, the decision-making framework should prioritize solutions that maintain data integrity, provide a clear audit trail, and align with any applicable regulatory guidelines for data handling and process management. This often involves designing robust exception handling mechanisms within the BPM solution itself, rather than relying on manual, undocumented interventions. Question 17. Performance analysis shows that several critical business processes managed by IBM FileNet Business Process Manager v5.1 are experiencing significant delays, impacting customer satisfaction and operational efficiency. The current monitoring setup provides only high-level throughput metrics, making it difficult to pinpoint the exact stages or activities causing the slowdown. The organization operates under strict data privacy regulations that govern the handling of customer information. Which of the following approaches is the most professionally sound and compliant method to diagnose and address these performance bottlenecks? Option A. Establish a baseline of current process performance using existing high-level metrics, then introduce targeted, low-impact monitoring of key process stages and system resource utilization, focusing on aggregated data to identify deviations and potential bottlenecks without compromising sensitive information. Option B. Temporarily disable certain non-critical process steps to isolate the impact of other components on overall performance, then re-enable them one by one to measure their individual contribution to delays. Option C. Conduct extensive interviews with all end users and stakeholders involved in the affected processes to gather qualitative feedback on perceived slowdowns and potential causes. Option D. Implement enhanced logging across all process instances, capturing detailed data for every step and field to perform a granular analysis of execution flow and identify specific delays. Correct answer is D. Implement enhanced logging across all process instances, capturing detailed data for every step and field to perform a granular analysis of execution flow and identify specific delays. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in business process management, identifying and addressing performance bottlenecks without disrupting critical operations or violating data privacy regulations. The professional challenge lies in balancing the need for detailed process insight with the imperative to protect sensitive information and maintain system stability. Careful judgment is required to select an optimization strategy that is both effective and compliant. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a phased, data-driven methodology that aligns with principles of continuous improvement and risk management. By first establishing baseline metrics and then implementing targeted, non-intrusive monitoring, it ensures that any proposed optimizations are based on empirical evidence. This approach minimizes the risk of unintended consequences and allows for iterative refinement, which is crucial for complex systems like IBM FileNet BPM. Furthermore, it implicitly adheres to data governance best practices by focusing on aggregated performance data rather than individual sensitive records, thereby respecting privacy and security mandates. An incorrect approach that involves immediate, broad-scale logging of all process instance data, including sensitive fields, would represent a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This would likely violate data privacy laws, e.g., GDPR if applicable to the jurisdiction, or similar local regulations concerning personal data handling. By indiscriminately collecting and potentially exposing personally identifiable information, PI, or confidential business data, such an approach also poses a security risk, increasing the attack surface for data breaches. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on user feedback without objective performance data, is professionally unsound as it relies on subjective perceptions which may not accurately reflect actual bottlenecks. This can lead to misallocation of resources and ineffective solutions, failing to address the root cause of performance issues and potentially leading to compliance issues if the process itself is governed by specific service level agreements, SLAs, that are being missed. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Define the problem clearly. What specific performance issues are being observed? 2. Understand the context. What are the critical business functions and regulatory constraints? 3. Identify potential data sources. What performance metrics are available or can be collected ethically and legally? 4. Prioritize data collection. Start with less intrusive methods and aggregate data. 5. Analyze data systematically, look for patterns, trends, and anomalies. 6. Formulate hypotheses based on data, propose potential causes for bottlenecks. 7. Test hypotheses, implement targeted changes or further monitoring. 8. Measure impact, evaluate the effectiveness of interventions against baseline metrics. 9. Iterate and refine, continuously monitor and optimize the process. Throughout this process, adherence to data privacy, security, and relevant industry regulations is paramount. Question 18. Benchmark analysis indicates that a critical business process managed by IBM FileNet Business Process Manager V5. 1 is experiencing intermittent failures due to an external system dependency that is temporarily unavailable. The business requires an immediate solution to prevent significant operational disruption. Which of the following approaches best balances immediate operational needs with long-term governance and compliance requirements? Option A. Advise the business to halt the affected process until the external system dependency is fully resolved and operational. Option B. Create an undocumented ad hoc workaround to keep the process functioning, with the intention of formalizing it later if the issue persists. Option C. Implement a documented, temporary workaround within the FileNet BPM process, ensuring all deviations and approvals are logged, and a clear rollback plan is established for when the external dependency is restored. Option D. Develop and deploy a permanent, alternative solution immediately to bypass the unreliable external system, without extensive impact analysis or formal change control to expedite delivery. Correct answer is C. Implement a documented, temporary workaround within the FileNet BPM process, ensuring all deviations and approvals are logged, and a clear rollback plan is established for when the external dependency is restored. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in business process management, where a critical decision needs to be made under pressure, impacting both operational efficiency and regulatory compliance. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate need for a functional solution with the long-term implications of adhering to established governance and audit trails. The pressure to deliver quickly can tempt individuals to bypass standard procedures, creating potential risks. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves leveraging the existing FileNet BPM governance framework and its inherent audit capabilities. By documenting the deviation, obtaining necessary approvals, and ensuring the temporary solution is logged with a clear rollback plan, the organization maintains an auditable trail. This aligns with best practices for change management and regulatory compliance, as it demonstrates due diligence and accountability. FileNet BPM's design inherently supports this by providing workflow capabilities for approvals and logging of process modifications. This approach ensures that even temporary deviations are managed within a controlled environment, minimizing the risk of uncontrolled changes and facilitating future audits. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing a workaround without proper documentation or approval bypasses the established governance and audit mechanisms of FileNet BPM. This creates a shadow process that is not visible to the system's audit logs, making it impossible to track changes, understand the impact, or revert if necessary. This failure to maintain an auditable trail is a significant regulatory and ethical lapse, as it hinders compliance efforts and can lead to misrepresentation of system behavior. Developing a permanent solution immediately without fully assessing the impact on existing processes or without proper change control introduces significant risk. This approach prioritizes speed over thoroughness, potentially leading to unintended consequences, integration issues, or the creation of new compliance gaps. It bypasses the structured decision-making and validation steps that are crucial for maintaining system integrity and regulatory adherence. Ignoring the issue and hoping it resolves itself is the most negligent approach. This demonstrates a complete disregard for process governance, risk management, and regulatory obligations. It leaves the organization vulnerable to operational failures, data integrity issues, and potential noncompliance without any mechanism for detection or remediation. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established governance and regulatory requirements, even under pressure. This involves 1. Understanding the immediate problem and its potential impact. 2. Consulting existing documentation and governance frameworks like FileNet BPM's capabilities. 3. Identifying potential solutions, including temporary workarounds and permanent fixes. 4. Evaluating each solution against compliance, risk, and operational efficiency criteria. 5. Prioritizing solutions that maintain auditability and require appropriate approvals. 6. Documenting all decisions, actions, and justification, especially for deviations from standard procedures. 7. Implementing a clear rollback or remediation plan for any temporary measures. Question 19. Analysis of how to best integrate the legal department's concerns regarding data privacy and regulatory compliance into the design and implementation of a new automated workflow within IBM FileNet Business Process Manager v5. 1. When the legal department has raised objections about potential noncompliance in the initial proposed design. Option A. Automate the process as planned, and then conduct a post-implementation review with the legal department to identify any compliance gaps, with the understanding that remediation will be addressed in a future iteration. Option B. Implement a superficial compliance check, such as a simple disclaimer, within the FileNet BPM workflow without fundamentally altering the process to address the core data privacy and regulatory issues raised by the legal department. Option C. Proactively engage the legal department to understand their specific concerns and collaboratively design process modifications within FileNet BPM to ensure adherence to data privacy regulations and internal compliance policies. Option D. Proceed with the automation of the process as initially designed, informing the legal department of the changes, but without incorporating their specific feedback, assuming their concerns are overly cautious. The correct answer is C. Proactively engage the legal department to understand their specific concerns and collaboratively design process modifications within FileNet BPM to ensure adherence to data privacy regulations and internal compliance policies. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in business process management where a critical stakeholder, the legal department, has a vested interest in the accuracy and compliance of a process, specifically concerning data privacy and regulatory adherence. The challenge lies in balancing the need for process efficiency and automation with the stringent requirements of legal and compliance. The legal department's concerns are not merely about process flow, but about potential legal ramifications and reputational damage if the process fails to meet regulatory standards. This requires a careful, collaborative approach that prioritizes understanding and addressing their specific concerns, rather than dismissing them as impediments to automation. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves actively engaging the legal department to understand their specific concerns regarding data privacy and regulatory compliance within the FileNet Business Process Manager, BPM, solution. This means not just informing them of changes, but seeking their input on how the process can be designed or modified to meet their requirements. This aligns with best professional practice by fostering collaboration, ensuring regulatory adherence, and mitigating legal risks. In the context of IBM FileNet BPM v5. 1. This would involve reviewing process steps, data fields, and security configurations to ensure they align with relevant data protection laws and internal compliance policies. The emphasis is on proactive risk management and building a robust, compliant process from the outset, rather than retrofitting compliance measures later. This approach demonstrates a commitment to ethical business practices and responsible technology implementation. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to proceed with the automation of the process without adequately addressing the legal department's concerns. This represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It disregards the potential for non-compliance with data privacy regulations, which could lead to substantial fines, legal action, and reputational damage. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the legal framework governing data handling. Another incorrect approach is to implement a superficial solution that only appears to address the legal department's concerns without truly integrating their requirements into the process design. This could involve adding a checkbox or a generic disclaimer without fundamentally altering how sensitive data is handled or how compliance checks are performed within the FileNet BPM workflow. This approach is ethically questionable as it creates a false sense of security and compliance, potentially exposing the organization to the same risks as the first incorrect approach. It fails to uphold professional integrity by prioritizing expediency over genuine compliance. A third incorrect approach is to dismiss the legal department's input as overly cautious or as an obstacle to efficiency, and to proceed with the original, less compliant design. This demonstrates a failure to appreciate the critical role of legal and compliance in business operations. It is a regulatory failure because it ignores established legal requirements, and an ethical failure because it prioritizes perceived efficiency over the protection of individuals' data and the organization's legal standing. This approach fosters a culture of noncompliance and can lead to severe consequences. Professional reasoning. Professionals faced with this situation should adopt a structured decision-making process. First, acknowledge and validate the stakeholders' concerns, particularly those from departments like legal that are responsible for risk and compliance. Second, initiate a dialogue to fully understand the specific requirements and the rationale behind them. In the context of FileNet BPM, this means mapping these requirements to specific process steps, data elements, and security controls. Third, explore potential solutions collaboratively, considering how the FileNet BPM platform can be leveraged to meet these requirements effectively and efficiently. This might involve configuring specific gateways, using document management features for compliance evidence, or implementing role-based access controls. Fourth, document the agreed-upon solutions and their justification, ensuring transparency and accountability. Finally, implement and test the solution rigorously, with a final review by the legal department before deployment. This iterative and collaborative approach ensures that business objectives are met while upholding regulatory and ethical standards. Question 20. The control framework reveals that a critical customer onboarding process, implemented using IBM FileNet Business Process Manager V5, 1. may be inadvertently collecting and storing sensitive personal data in a manner that contravenes the data privacy regulations of the jurisdiction in which the company operates. The process owner is aware of this potential issue, but has not yet initiated any corrective actions, citing the complexity of the BPM workflow and the potential for disruption to the sales team. What is the most ethically and regulatorily sound course of action? Option A. Advise the sales team to verbally inform customers about the potential data handling issue and obtain their consent to proceed with the current IBM FileNet BPM v5. 1 process. Option B. Document the potential compliance gap and continue the current IBM FileNet BPM v5. 1 process, relying on the low probability of detection and the business impact of halting operations. Option C. Immediately halt the customer onboarding process until a thorough review and remediation of the data handling within the IBM FileNet BPM v5. 1 workflow can be completed and verified for compliance. Option D. Implement a temporary manual process for data handling outside of the IBM FileNet BPM v5. 1 workflow for new customer data, while continuing the existing automated process and planning for a future comprehensive remediation. The correct answer is C. Immediately halt the customer onboarding process until a thorough review and remediation of the data handling within the IBM FileNet BPM v5. 1 workflow can be completed and verified for compliance. Explanation. The control framework reveals a situation where a business process, designed using IBM FileNet Business Process Manager, BPM v5, 1, is identified as potentially violating a specific data privacy regulation. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate need to rectify the non-compliance with the operational continuity of the business process and the potential impact on data integrity and user access. The core ethical dilemma is whether to prioritize immediate remediation, which might disrupt operations and require significant rework, or to implement a temporary workaround that might not fully address the compliance gap, but allows for continued business function while a more permanent solution is developed. The correct approach involves a thorough, documented assessment of the compliance gap, followed by the implementation of a remediation plan that aligns with the identified regulatory requirements. This approach ensures that the business process is brought into full compliance, mitigating legal and reputational risks. It demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and adherence to regulatory mandates, which is paramount in data-sensitive environments. This involves engaging relevant stakeholders, including legal counsel and compliance officers, to ensure the remediation strategy is robust and defensible. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the identified violation, assuming it is minor or unlikely to be detected. This is a direct violation of regulatory obligations and ethical responsibilities, exposing the organization to significant penalties and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach is to implement a superficial fix without a comprehensive understanding of the underlying issue or its broader implications. This might create a false sense of security while leaving the organization vulnerable to future scrutiny and potential violations. Third incorrect approach is to prioritize business continuity over compliance without a clear plan to address the violation promptly. This demonstrates a disregard for regulatory requirements and can lead to a culture of non-compliance. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with understanding the specific regulatory requirements. This involves consulting with legal and compliance experts to interpret the regulations accurately. Next, a detailed assessment of the current process's adherence to these regulations is crucial. Based on this assessment, a risk-based remediation plan should be developed, considering the severity of the violation, potential impact, and available resources. This plan should be documented, approved by relevant stakeholders, and executed with clear timelines and accountability. Continuous monitoring and auditing are essential to ensure ongoing compliance.